February 28, 1997, Los Angeles. A Friday morning that would turn into a battlefield. At 9:17 a.m., two men stepped out of a car. Larry Phillips Jr. and Emil Matasareanu. They weren't dressed like ordinary bank robbers. They weren't carrying pistols. They came dressed for war. From head to toe, they wore thick homemade armor. Kevlar vests layered with steel plates, arm guards, leg guards, even groin protectors. They looked less like thieves and more like soldiers stepping onto foreign soil. And in their duffel bags, not handguns, not sawed-off shotguns. They carried assault rifles. Modified AR-15s, AK-47s with drum magazines, dozens of loaded clips, thousands of rounds of ammunition. For years, Phillips and Emil had been preparing, stockpiling weapons, practicing at firing ranges, planning robberies to build their confidence. On this morning, they were ready to unleash it all. Inside the bank, customers were waiting in line. Tellers counted stacks of bills. Ordinary lives moved at ordinary speed until the glass doors exploded open. Phillips and Emil stormed in. "This is a robbery," one shouted, his voice muffled by the mask. Phillips raised his rifle and fired a burst into the ceiling. Plaster showered down as terrified screams filled the lobby. In seconds, chaos replaced routine. People were shoved to the ground. Mothers covered their children. Bank employees froze behind counters as the sound of automatic fire echoed through the marble walls. What Phillips and Emil didn't know was that the LAPD was already waiting. Minutes earlier, a patrol car had spotted them putting on armor in the parking lot. The officers radioed it in. By the time the robbers entered the bank, police were surrounding the building. Inside, Phillips rushed the vault. He wanted millions. Emil ordered tellers to empty their drawers into bags, but the bank's main vault had time locks. The doors would not open. Instead of millions, they stuffed about $300,000 into their duffels. A fortune to most people. But for men who had prepared for war, it wasn't enough. They checked their watches, adjusted their rifles, and prepared to leave. When the doors opened, Los Angeles erupted. Outside, squad cars lined the streets. Officers crouched behind doors, pistols drawn. Civilians fled in every direction. And then the shooting started. Phillips lifted his AK-47 and sprayed the parking lot. Bullets ripped into cars, windshields exploding into clouds of glass. Officers dove for cover. Within seconds, the quiet street became a war zone. Police fired back, but their pistols were useless. Shots bounced off the robbers' armor like raindrops hitting metal. Shotgun blasts struck Phillips's vest, but did nothing. Officers realized instantly. Their weapons could not stop these men. Radio calls grew desperate. "Officer down! Officer down!" Within minutes, 8 LAPD officers lay wounded. The robbers moved methodically, advancing like soldiers in combat. Phillips walked casually across the lot, firing controlled bursts. Emil carried a modified rifle with a 75-round drum magazine, spraying bullets into squad cars with terrifying precision. Their armor made them fearless. They walked straight into the crossfire, seemingly untouchable. More than 300 officers rushed to the area. Helicopters circled above. Civilians were trapped behind cars, hiding in shops, cowering under tables in nearby restaurants. Windows shattered. Storefronts collapsed. Bullets ricocheted off walls. Los Angeles no longer looked like a city. It looked like a battlefield. Inside the bank, hostages lay frozen, covering their heads as bullets zipped past the walls outside. For them, every second felt like an eternity. The LAPD realized they were completely outgunned. Pistols and shotguns against rifles and body armor was suicide. Officers sprinted into nearby gun shops and begged owners for AR-15s. Store clerks handed over rifles on the spot. For the first time in American policing, patrol officers had to borrow civilian weapons just to survive. Meanwhile, Phillips and Emil continued their advance. Phillips's rifle thundered until it suddenly jammed. He cursed under his mask, fumbling to reload. An officer armed with one of the borrowed rifles took aim. Rounds slammed into Phillips. He stumbled backward, bleeding. Realizing he was cornered, Phillips pulled out a handgun, placed it under his chin, and ended it himself. One robber down. But the war wasn't over. Emil climbed into their getaway car. The windshield was shattered, the body riddled with holes. He turned the key, slammed the gas, and tried to flee the parking lot. Police cars swarmed him. Officers fired into the engine block, into the tires, into the windows. Emil sprayed bullets out the driver's side, out the windshield, desperate to break free. But his legs were shredded by incoming rounds. Blood soaked the seat. The car stalled. Emil collapsed behind the wheel. The firefight was over. In total, nearly 2,000 rounds had been fired. 12 officers were wounded. 8 civilians injured. Miraculously, no hostages were killed inside the bank. But the physical damage was staggering. Entire blocks were shredded. Storefronts reduced to rubble. Patrol cars looked like Swiss cheese. North Hollywood resembled a war-torn city. News helicopters broadcast the chaos live across the country. Viewers watched stunned as reporters described officers crawling to safety, civilians bleeding on sidewalks, and robbers lying lifeless on asphalt. America had never seen anything like it. In the aftermath, investigators collected weapons, armor, and shell casings by the thousands. They pieced together the scale of the arsenal Phillips and Emil had brought. Assault rifles modified for maximum firepower, homemade armor crafted in garages, a stockpile built through years of robberies and black market deals. Officers admitted it publicly. They had been hopelessly outgunned. Pistols against rifles, shotguns against armor. It had never been a fair fight. The shootout changed American policing forever. Departments across the country upgraded their weapons. Patrol cars began carrying AR-15s. Officers were trained for urban combat. SWAT teams expanded. Body armor became standard issue. But for survivors inside the bank, the trauma never ended. Many described years later how they still heard the gunfire in their sleep. One hostage recalled lying face down on the floor, staring at her child's shoes, thinking it would be the last thing she ever saw. Others described crawling on their hands and knees through broken glass, convinced they wouldn't make it out alive. For civilians on the street, the memory was just as sharp. Parents dragging children across asphalt. Shoppers hiding under counters as bullets shattered windows. Residents frozen in their homes as automatic fire echoed for nearly an hour. The legacy of Phillips and Emil wasn't money. They left the bank with a fraction of what they planned. The legacy was fear. A single robbery had paralyzed one of the largest cities in America. By the time calm returned, Los Angeles had learned a brutal lesson. Criminals were evolving, and police needed to evolve too. Today, the streets of North Hollywood look calm again. Shoppers walk in and out of the same bank. Cars drive down quiet boulevards. Life looks ordinary. But for those who were there, February 28, 1997, will never fade. For 44 minutes, Los Angeles wasn't Los Angeles. It was a battlefield. The North Hollywood Shootout. The day LA went to war. As years passed, the North Hollywood Shootout became more than a piece of LA history. It evolved into a cautionary tale. Law enforcement agencies studied every second of the confrontation, dissecting their tactics, examining each decision taken under fire. Training facilities replayed the shootout like a lesson in survival. Recruits learned the importance of new weaponry, new armor, and the urgency of adapting to a new era. Political leaders across the nation watched the footage, recognizing a need for legislative change. Discussions on gun control intensified, prompting debate over how military-grade weapons reached civilian hands. In the community, the legacy was personal. Local schools commemorated anniversaries, reminding students that despite technology and progress, vigilance was critical. City planners examined infrastructure vulnerabilities, reinforcing patrol presence in critical areas, ensuring faster response times. Residents recalled how a quiet routine exploded into chaos, a stark reminder that peace could shatter any day. It emblematized how fragile safety really was. For families of the officers, the shootout symbolized courage under fire, bravery in the face of overwhelming odds. They proudly recounted stories of heroism, of a police force standing its ground despite insurmountable challenges. TV specials revisited the day with interviews and dramatized reenactments, ensuring a new generation understood the gravity of the event. Documentaries captured raw emotion as survivors detailed their experiences, how time slowed as they heard bullets ricochet, how fear and resolve fueled their determination to live. Survivor support groups emerged, providing a space for those who still carried emotional wounds invisible to the eye. Wounds made on a battlefield in their own city. From the ashes of destruction rose a commitment to never be caught off guard again. A commitment that transformed how America viewed crime, safety, and readiness. In North Hollywood, the clock ticks forward, but February 28th remains a date etched into the city's soul. It marks a turning point, not just for Los Angeles, but for the entire nation. A day remembered not for the criminals who waged war, but for the resilience of a city that stood its ground. A story not just about violence, but about the spirit that emerged stronger, more determined. A chapter in history that will continue to remind every generation of the day Los Angeles battled the unimaginable,